Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're looking at the most noteworthy historical moments that were overshadowed by even larger ones.
And I could feel the warmth from the barrel when he pulled the trigger.
O.J. Simpson granted parole, overshadowed by the death of Chester Bennington.
My vote is to grant your parole effective when eligible.
And I concur with Commissioner Korda and grant parole. And in addition, our decision, although difficult, is fair and just.
Considering how widespread both of his infamous trials were in the 1990s, as well as his armed robbery conviction in 2008, it's hard to imagine any news about him taking a back seat. After serving what was initially a 33-year prison sentence, it was announced on July 20th, 2017 that O.J. Simpson was granted parole. An update that large would have normally dominated the airwaves, but the sudden unexpected death of Lincoln Park frontman Chester Bennington that same day ultimately took the spotlight.
He was reportedly found at his residence in the Los Angeles area on Thursday morning. The father of 6 children, Bennington was 41 years old.
Besides countless fans and media outlets posting about it, several prominent celebrities also posted tributes to Bennington. With that, a decision that would have once been the cause of national conversation was reduced to a mere blip. Discovery of Susanus I's tomb, overshadowed by Germany invading France. Archaeological discoveries, especially that of royals, normally pique global interest. Finding Pharaoh Susanus I's tomb completely untouched was a true marvel, as it was the rare Egyptian tomb that hadn't been ransacked by grave robbers. His sarcophagus was even shown to King Farouk on April 17, 1940. The study of both his body and the items buried with him could have held people's attention indefinitely. Unfortunately, a few weeks later, all news surrounding the discovery effectively evaporated following Germany's invasion of France. The heated battle was a pivotal moment in what became World War II, and as such, it rightfully became the topic of global conversation. The tomb was pushed to the back burner, where it stayed for nearly 80 years before finally being recognized. The death of John Adams, overshadowed by the death of Thomas Jefferson.
My dear friend, tried myself in the school of human affliction. I know well and feel what you have lost, what you have suffered, are suffering, and have yet to endure. The same trials have taught me that for ills so immeasurable, time and silence are the only medicines.
They may have passed on the same day, but it doesn't mean they were reported on similarly. While both John Adams and Thomas Jefferson were integral parts of the birth of the United States and both served as president, the death of the latter created a far larger ripple. Jefferson's involvement in the writing of the Declaration of Independence had cemented him as an American hero. Meanwhile, Adams's controversial term had damaged his legacy by the time he left the White House. When they both left the mortal coil just hours apart, on July 4, 1826, it was Jefferson's name that was plastered on newspapers and memorials across the country. Adams was mourned as well, but it was on a much smaller scale. Servant Girl Annihilator's killing spree, overshadowed by Jack the Ripper's killing spree.
Lurking in the shadows. Identity hidden. Jack the Ripper killed repeatedly, but always managed to elude capture. The world's most notorious serial killer stalked London streets for 3 months in the late 1800s.
Their crimes were both horrifically violent, but only one went on to become a cultural phenomenon. Years before Jack the Ripper first struck, a city in Texas fell victim to one of the country's first serial killers. Known as the Servant Girl Annihilator, he reportedly slaughtered 8 people in the mid-1880s.
Throughout 1885, the New York Post, then called the Evening Post, reported how Austin, Texas was being plagued by a wave of murders at the hands of one of our nation's first serial killers.
He was never identified or brought to justice, and was quickly forgotten once the infamous Whitechapel murders began in London. Jack the Ripper's instantly recognizable nickname and the sensationalization of his crimes by the media ensured that his notoriety eclipsed that of his American predecessor. Even today, the constant usage of his likeness in fiction, historical works, and even restaurant names has cemented his legacy, whereas the Annihilator and his victims have essentially been lost to time. The death of C.S. Lewis, overshadowed by the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Normally, the demise of two respected authors on the same day would be a national story. However, an even more tragic event made certain that it would go forgotten instead. C.S. Lewis was an iconic writer, with his series The Chronicles of Narnia in particular inspiring several other prolific works.
For Narnia and forever!
Despite his importance in the literary world, the November 22, 1963 passing of both him and Aldous Huxley was hardly talked about, and for valid yet horrific reasons. That same day, President John F. Kennedy had been assassinated during a motorcade.
Boy, this is something. The press is standing up high, getting a lot of shots of this. He's broken away from his plan and gone right up to the fence to shake hands with people.
The shocking event easily became the top headline across the country, ultimately at the expense of both authors' death announcements. Santa Fe High School shooting, overshadowed by Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's wedding. On May 18, 2018, the city of Santa Fe was rocked when a high school student opened fire on his peers and teachers. 10 people lost their lives and over a dozen more were injured, but they didn't hold the public's awareness for long.
Of loved ones clinging to one another.
I've always kind of felt like eventually it was going to happen here too. I wasn't surprised, I was just scared.
The next day, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle celebrated their marriage, an event that was covered around the world. The televised ceremony was watched globally, with nearly 30 million viewers reportedly being American. Additionally, 15 channels broadcasted the union, making it practically impossible to avoid. It didn't help that several Santa Fe citizens avoided the attention from the media following the attack, inadvertently causing it to fall to the wayside. Sinking of the Sultana, overshadowed by the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln. Normally, the death of one man wouldn't overshadow the passing of over 1,000 others. When that man is President Abraham Lincoln, however, it suddenly becomes more understandable.
Buzzard's guts, man. I am the President of the United States of America, clothed in immense power. You will procure me these votes.
The shocking assassination of the leader on April 14, 1865, was a tragically prolific event that led to mourning on a national scale. The 3 weeks of funeral processes and following trials for those involved captivated the country's attention and prevented them from noticing the worst maritime disaster in United States history. On April 27th of that year, the steamboat Sultana unexpectedly exploded, causing the death of some 1,800 people. Despite the sheer scale of the tragedy, it faded to the background as the nation mourned the loss of its leader.
And they took off anyway. There are only 2 known pictures of the Sultana. This is one of them as it passed through Helena on April 26th.
But it shows the overwhelming overloading of the boat.
And that brings us to the night of April 27th. The Sultana steamboat lit up the dark and cold Mississippi River. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. And then...
detection of the wow signal, overshadowed by the death of Elvis Presley.
Stunned fans mill around the gates of Elvis Presley's Whitehaven mansion this afternoon while scores of fans, friends, and show business celebrities pour into Memphis for funeral services tomorrow for the King of Rock and Roll.
You know you're an icon when your demise makes the majority of people overlook potential proof of aliens. Elvis Presley was larger than life, even in death. He passed away on August 16, 1977, just hours after Jerry Eman detected a mysterious sound from outer space. The intensity and duration of the wow signal has caused plenty of debate in modern times. However, after its discovery, it quickly fell to the wayside once it became known that the King of Rock and Roll had died. Fans and media outlets flocked to the story both to mourn him and speculate on the cause. It doesn't help that the signal was never heard again, causing it to quickly fade from the minds of the public. The Bath School disaster, overshadowed by Charles Lindbergh's transatlantic flight. When someone achieves something truly great, it makes sense to focus on it, although it came at the cost of ignoring another event, That was the case for Charles Lindbergh's May 20th to 21st, 1927 flight across the Atlantic Ocean.
Get busy. Get to work. The sleep's crawling out of its box again. Now put it back. Keep the lid on. Force yourself to think. Now let's see now.
The incredible feat easily dominated headlines, despite the fact that just a few days beforehand, dozens had lost their lives in the Bath School massacre. A man named Andrew Kehoe set off multiple explosions that killed 44 students and teachers. It was initially covered by journalists, but Lindbergh's legendary accomplishment soon took precedence. As a result, the violent act faded to the background of history, where it's remained to this day. Kim Jong-un declared supreme leader of North Korea, overshadowed by Katy Perry's divorce. Celebrity culture has become a prevalent force around the world, and this is one of the strongest examples. A nation declaring the appointment of a new leader would normally be cause for international headlines, especially one as polarizing as North Korea. Kim Jong-un being declared supreme leader on December 30th, 2011, should have garnered a global reaction. That same day, news leaked that pop star Katy Perry was getting a divorce from comedian Russell Brand.
New reports this morning that Katy Perry rang in the new year with a smile despite the fact that her 14-month marriage to Russell Brand is over. Couples say they will always be friends, and Brand could walk away from the brief marriage with a windfall.
It didn't take long for that story to sweep across the nation, and it soon became the talk of the whole country. It was covered by entertainment and political outlets alike, effortlessly stealing Kim's thunder.
This legacy has been carried out by his descendants into the 21st century.
Black Saturday bushfires, overshadowed by 2008 financial crisis. The Black Saturday bushfires, which ravaged Australia between February 7th and March 14th, 2009, are considered one of the worst natural disasters in the country's history.
Flames, lots of flames, trees on fire, 100 foot high, embers, branches falling, animals running for their life.
During this period, a series of around 400 bushfires were ignited in Victoria, Australia's most densely populated state. Despite its immense impact within Australia, the disaster received limited international media attention, largely because of the concurrent global financial crisis.
Fear spread in the month of September 2008 at a rate that was like a tsunami.
The worldwide economic turmoil, which began unfolding in early 2007, peaked in late 2008 and early 2009, leaving very few reporters and resources available to cover other events. Consequently, the Black Saturday bushfires, which claimed 173 lives and destroyed thousands of homes, remained largely underreported on the global stage.
I've never seen anything like it. It came out of the forest at 100 miles an hour, and it just took everything in its path.
The Great Halifax Explosion, overshadowed by U.S. declaration of war on Austria-Hungary. On December 6, 1917, a French cargo ship carrying a vast amount of explosives collided with a Norwegian vessel at the Halifax harbor in Nova Scotia, Canada. The resulting blast devastated the city of Halifax, killing nearly 2,000 people and injuring thousands more.
It brought a city to its knees in an instant. 2 square kilometers of Halifax simply obliterated by the largest human-made explosion prior to Hiroshima.
In any other period, this would have been the top news story, but it flew under the radar as it happened during a critical juncture of World War I. The day after the disaster, the U.S. Congress and Senate passed a resolution declaring war on the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which was signed by President Woodrow Wilson on the same day.
Woodrow Wilson, after all, runs for re-election in 1916 on the slogan, "He kept us out of war." And yet, within a year after winning that election, that very same president is declaring war on the Germans.
This shifted global attention away from the tragedy, despite the significant human toll and immense destruction it caused in Halifax. Soviet Union detains U.S. convoy, overshadowed by the day the music died. February 3rd, 1959 is often remembered as the day the music died, because of the plane crash that killed musicians Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and J.P. the Big Bopper Richardson.
The young pilot's lack of experience led him to lose control. He dipped too low, a wing hit the ground, and sent the plane tumbling across this field.
This tragic event was widely reported and has since been referenced in various songs and movies.
The day the music died.
Due to this immense coverage, it eclipsed another significant incident on the same day. In West Germany, amid Cold War tensions, 5 U.S. Army soldiers were detained by Soviet officers after they refused inspection of their trucks upon crossing from East Germany. This action, perceived by the U.S. as a provocation from the Soviet Union, likely would have been a major news story if not for the attention drawn by the plane crash. Frank Sinatra's death, overshadowed by the Seinfeld finale.
We begin tonight with the death of an American original, Frank Sinatra. For the better part of this century, he set the standard for popular music in this country and around the world.
On the surface, Frank Sinatra and Seinfeld share no similarities, but in actuality, the two are linked in a rather heartbreaking way. On May 14, 1998, Seinfeld aired its highly anticipated series finale.
And how do you find with respect to the charge of criminal indifference?
We find the defendants guilty.
However, while around 76 million people gathered around their TVs to watch the show bow out, Sinatra suffered a massive heart attack at his Los Angeles residence and was rushed to the hospital. According to the fire chief, Sinatra's swift transportation was facilitated by the unusually empty streets, as millions were home tuning in to the finale. Even Sinatra's daughter Nancy missed the chance to spend his final moments with him, as she too was engrossed in the show. Tragically, despite medical efforts, the iconic crooner passed away at the hospital.
For millions of fans, his voice was the soundtrack for a lifetime of memories.
2011 Norway domestic terror attacks, overshadowed by the death of Amy Winehouse.
24 hours later, an almost incomprehensible picture emerging tonight from Norway after those 2 horrific terror attacks. First in downtown Oslo, then at a youth camp. The death toll has now risen to 92, so many of the victims children. That number is expected to climb.
When 2 huge tragedies occur in the same short time frame, there's a chance that one may get more coverage than the other. If a celebrity is involved, those chances unfortunately increase. The attacks carried out by Anders Behring Breivik on July 22, 2011, led to the untimely and horrific deaths of dozens of people, many of whom were children attending summer camp. It quickly became the center of global attention, but only for a day. On the 23rd, news broke that beloved singer Amy Winehouse had unexpectedly passed away.
Next of kin have been informed, and I can confirm that the deceased is Amy Winehouse.
The media quickly pivoted, and it wasn't long before the coverage of her fate surpassed those of the victims from the previous day. The Pesiggo Fire, overshadowed by the Great Chicago Fire.
There was a census the year prior, 1870, and there were 1,750 people in the populace of Pesiggo. They feel that 800 survived.
The Pesiggo Fire of 1871, which ravaged northeastern Wisconsin and parts of Michigan, takes its name from the city of Pesiggo, which was most heavily affected. Despite being the deadliest wildfire in recorded history, consuming over 1 million acres and claiming up to 2,500 lives, its significance was overshadowed by a similar calamity that befell a larger city. On the same day, Chicago suffered a devastating conflagration, resulting in significant damage and approximately 300 deaths.
When they saw how red the sky was, they said that it was Judgment Day.
Although both tragic events, one might assume that the Pesiggo Fire, with its vastly higher death toll, would have garnered more media attention. However, as Pesiggo was far less developed than Chicago, its tragedy has largely been extinguished from historical accounts and public memory. The death of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, overshadowed by Tiananmen Square Massacre. On June 4, 1989, the Chinese government sent in troops who opened fire on thousands of peaceful protesters at Tiananmen Square in Beijing.
China is a nation at war with itself. As a result, the world is a much different place tonight.
While exact figures vary, some estimates suggest the death toll reached as high as 2,600. This excessively violent reaction to peaceful demonstrations captured the world's attention and completely overshadowed other events that occurred around that period. Just the night before, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, who led the Islamic Revolution and shaped the country's politics for years, passed away. But this went largely under the radar.
Every year, the anniversary of his death brings together hundreds of thousands of mourners of all ages.
Other events that were overshadowed by the massacre include the deadly Ufa train disaster in the Soviet Union and Poland's first partially free elections. First inauguration of Dwight D. Eisenhower, overshadowed by Lucy Ricardo and Lucille Ball giving birth. If you're watching this video, chances are you probably weren't alive when the classic sitcom I Love Lucy aired back in the 1950s. To illustrate its immense popularity, the famous episode in which Lucy gives birth to little Ricky was watched by around 44 million viewers, accounting for nearly 74% of all U.S. homes with TVs.
Now, let's see. Is there any more information I need?
She's going to have a baby.
Yes, I sensed that.
This episode, titled Lucy Goes to the Hospital, aired on January 19, 1953, and was made to coincide with Lucille Ball's actual delivery of her son, Desi Arnaz Jr. The remarkable blend of television and reality totally upstaged the inauguration of Dwight D. Eisenhower for his first term, which took place the following day and attracted only 29 million viewers.
I will faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States.
Attack on Clark Field, overshadowed by attack on Pearl Harbor. December 7, 1941, will forever live on in infamy. That day, Japanese planes launched a surprise attack on the American naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii.
After just 90 minutes, the U.S. Navy's proudest warships sat smoldering and sinking. Hundreds of aircraft shredded.
This assault claimed over 2,400 lives and left more than 1,000 others injured, while also causing significant damage to military vessels and planes. The shock and devastation of Pearl Harbor was so overwhelming that many do not know that another attack occurred the following day at Clark Field, a U.S. military base in the Philippines. The casualties in this attack were comparatively lower, with 80 killed and 150 wounded, and it got buried under the unfolding chaos of Pearl Harbor.
Troops of the 14th Corps bring up artillery to attack the Clark Field area, which is subjected to heavy shelling before tanks and infantrymen move in.
Surprisingly, no official investigation into the Clark Field attack was ever launched. The Texas City disaster, overshadowed by Jackie Robinson's Major League debut. The Texas City disaster of April 16, 1947, remains one of the deadliest industrial accidents in American history.
April 16th, still remembered in Texas City as a day of unimaginable tragedy.
A French-registered vessel called the SS Grand Camp, which was carrying over 2,000 tons of ammonium nitrate, detonated unexpectedly, killing at least 581 people and leaving more than 5,000 injured.
A blast so powerful that it was heard 200 miles away in Louisiana.
Yet, the magnitude of this disaster was largely overshadowed and underreported due to the historic Major League Baseball debut of Jackie Robinson the day before.
The Dodgers owner, Branch Rickey, who took the risk of hiring the first black player, warned Robinson he would be held to the highest standards imaginable.
Robinson's breakthrough as the first African-American player in the modern major leagues dominated headlines and sparked widespread debates in the public. All of this fervor surrounding Robinson breaking the color barrier tragically relegated the Texas City disaster to the background.
In Texas City today, there are memorials to a time that lingers in memory. The 3,000-pound anchor of the ship Grand Camp serves as a daily reminder.
The war on waste, overshadowed by 9/11 terrorist attacks. On September 10, 2001, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld held a press conference announcing that the U.S. Defense Department had been unable to trace $2.3 trillion.
According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions. We cannot share information from floor to floor in this building because it's stored on dozens of different technological systems that are inaccessible or incompatible.
Rumsfeld came down on Pentagon bureaucracy, stating that wasted funds could be a matter of life and death. But this crackdown on misspending was stopped dead in its tracks the very next day. Tragically, 2 hijacked planes crashed into the World Trade Center on the morning of September 11th, while a third was flown into the Pentagon and a fourth crashed into a Pennsylvania field.
We saw a lot of things that day that no one should see.
Compared to the thousands of deaths on 9/11, the missing $2.3 trillion suddenly seemed like an inconsequential loss. The war on waste ultimately took a backseat to the war on terror, which cost an estimated $5 trillion. The death of Groucho Marx, overshadowed by the death of Elvis Presley. The world lost a comedic legend on August 19, 1977, when Groucho Marx died at age 86.
If any man should come between a husband and his bride, we find out which one she prefers by letting her decide. If she prefers the other man, the husband steps outside. We stand him up against the wall and pop goes the weasel.
As had happened with the wow signal, Groucho's death was somewhat overlooked due to Elvis Presley dying from a heart attack 3 days earlier.
Cause of death has been ascribed to hypertensive heart disease and coronary artery heart disease as a contributory factor.
Elvis was only 42 years old and arguably the biggest solo musical artist in the world, and his death triggered a massive outpouring of emotion from fans worldwide. While Elvis had never really left the limelight, Marx had become an elder statesman of comedy and vaudeville, and as such hadn't really been in the spotlight for nearly a decade. While both men left behind rich legacies, media attention tended to latch on to the younger, charismatic, and revolutionary figure that was Elvis Presley. Beirut terror attacks, overshadowed by Paris terror attacks. When ISIS bombed a local refugee camp on November 12, 2015, Beirut, Lebanon suffered its most severe terrorist attack since the Lebanese Civil War.
This man said he was praying when the blast blew a door right over his head.
With 43 total casualties, this tragedy likely would have been all over the news and social media if it weren't for another act of terror committed 1 day later. On November 13th, ISIS bombed Saint-Denis, a northern suburb in Paris, France, leaving 130 people dead and hundreds more injured.
The Islamic State group later claimed responsibility in revenge for French airstrikes in Syria.
Given the higher death toll, the Paris attacks caused many people to forget about the Beirut attacks. Nevertheless, there's no denying these were two incredibly dark days for humanity that mustn't be ignored. The Rwandan Genocide, overshadowed by the death of Kurt Cobain. In 1994, Rwanda experienced one of the most horrific atrocities of the 20th century. The Rwandan Genocide saw the mass killings of hundreds of thousands of Tutsi ethnic minority members and moderate Hutus by armed Hutu militias.
A campaign of violence spread from the capital Kigali throughout the country, which will not stop for 3 months.
Despite its rapid and brutal spread throughout the country, the genocide received scant attention in the United States. It commenced on April 7, 1994, the day before singer Kurt Cobain was found dead at his home, having taken his own life.
Outside the Cobain home, shocked fans held on to one another and reflected on the loss of a man and his music.
Media coverage was largely dominated by Cobain's death, eclipsing the ongoing tragedy in Rwanda. As the genocide unfolded over a span of 3 months, it remained overshadowed in international media by Nelson Mandela's election and later the O.J. Simpson murder case. Harriet Quimby's flight, overshadowed by the sinking of the Titanic. In addition to being the first woman in the United States to attain a pilot's license, Harriet Quimby was also the first female aviator to fly across the English Channel.
Well, she was a modern woman in a not-so-modern age. At a time when her contemporaries were wearing petticoats and corsets, Harriet Quimby, as you see, was climbing into a cockpit decked out in her satin flying suit and waving energetically to the crowd.
Taking off in Dover, England on April 16, 1912, she reached her destination in 59 minutes, landing on a beach in northern France. But where Quimby successfully completed her voyage, the same couldn't be said for the RMS Titanic. After hitting an iceberg, this passenger liner sank in the North Atlantic Ocean on April 15, 1912, claiming over 1,500 lives. Overshadowed by this disaster, Quimby never got her moment in the sun and died in an aviation accident a couple of months later, leaving many to consider her an unsung hero.
Harriet Quimby blazed a trail and followed it with passion and conviction.
The death of Mother Teresa, overshadowed by the death of Princess Diana. Mother Teresa and Diana, Princess of Wales, had a great deal in common.
Diana was the Queen of Hearts, Mother Teresa was the Queen of the Poor.
Both were known for their charity work, helping to raise awareness of leprosy and HIV/AIDS. Princess Diana notably visited Mother Teresa at a New York convent in June of 1997. On August 31st, just a couple of months after their meeting, the 36-year-old Diana died following a car crash in Paris.
The French capital's emergency services immediately announced Mr. Elfire and the driver had died, but it took them 2 hours to cut the princess out of the twisted wreckage.
Less than a week after her untimely death, Teresa passed away due to heart failure on September 5th. But with the public already coping with the sudden loss of Diana, Teresa's death didn't receive nearly as much media attention. Nonetheless, these two women are still remembered for their dedication and compassion, ultimately making the world a better place. Man rowing across an ocean, overshadowed by man walking on the moon. John Fairfax became the first man to row solo across an entire ocean, with the journey taking 180 days.
I'm obviously very pleased. I think what I have done was not easy, and it took just about everything I could give to do it.
Starting his adventure at the Canary Islands, Fairfax crossed the Atlantic and arrived in Florida on June 19, 1969. Unfortunately, this just so happened to be the day before Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became the first humans to land on the moon.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
Armstrong's one small step for man might have eclipsed John Fairfax's crossing, but his incredible feat didn't go completely unrecognized. The Apollo 11 crew themselves sent Fairfax a congratulatory message stating, quote, "As fellow explorers, we salute you on this great occasion," but few others took notice. The death of Farrah Fawcett, overshadowed by the death of Michael Jackson.
A final farewell to Farrah Fawcett, a private ceremony in Los Angeles, and a tribute to the star who was the face of the 70s.
Following a battle with cancer, Farrah Fawcett died on June 25, 2009. Although Fawcett's deteriorating health was among the most widely discussed topics in the news, she ultimately had to share the spotlight with Michael Jackson, who was pronounced dead the same day.
Very, very sad news, Jim Moray, and to all of our viewers. Both the Los Angeles Times and CBS News are both now reporting that Michael Jackson has died.
While Fawcett was still heavily mourned, the King of Pop's passing dominated popular culture. MJ's death was front-page news, but Fawcett's was relegated to back pages and entertainment sections. Worse still was the Oscars In Memoriam segment the following year, which featured Jackson but saw Fawcett controversially excluded. The 1994 NBA Finals, overshadowed by O.J. Simpson's Car Chase. The idea of a Major League Final getting overshadowed might seem unthinkable, but that's exactly what happened during the telecast of the 1994 NBA Finals.
The Los Angeles Police Department right now is actively searching for Mr. Simpson.
On June 13, 1994, O.J. Simpson's ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and friend Ron Goldman were discovered murdered in Los Angeles, and O.J. quickly became the prime suspect. Simpson was to turn himself into police custody on Friday, June 17th, but instead fled in his white Ford Bronco, triggering the now infamous low-speed chase. With CNN, ABC, and CBS covering the live events, NBC followed suit, interrupting Game 5 between the Houston Rockets and the New York Knicks. While the game was still aired via split screen, the juice breaking loose was clearly the bigger story.
It's a very serious situation here, and I can tell you one that is hard to believe with my own eyes.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into Settings and switch on your notifications. The capture of Rome, overshadowed by Operation Overlord.
To say that there's a lot riding on D-Day, Operation Overlord, is a massive understatement.
Even if you never paid attention in history class, you're familiar with Operation Overlord, aka D-Day. Taking place on June 6, 1944, this operation commenced the invasion of Normandy, with Allied forces storming French shores. D-Day, however, occurred only a couple of days after American troops seized Rome on June 4th.
The Allied Fifth Army entered the Eternal City from the south, acclaimed by cheering multitudes.
Unlike the Normandy invasion, however, this mission wasn't entirely successful in the long run, as it resulted in German forces escaping due to a miscalculation that later resulted in Allied casualties. The Normandy landings, meanwhile, remain the largest beach invasion ever, with that day proving to be a major turning point in the course of the Second World War. Which of these stories do you think deserved a better spotlight? Let us know in the comments below.
Buzzards, guts, man. I am the President of the United States of America, clothed in immense power. You will procure me these votes.